Okay, welcome to the Board of Park Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, February 5th. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers?
Here.
Mr. Emmerich?
Here.
Mrs. Westfall?
Here.
Okay, we have our minutes of our meeting of January 3rd. It was your meeting, January 3rd. Are there any additions, corrections, and deletions to those minutes?
No.
Well, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They stand accepted. Reports. Mr. Drake, welcome back to work.
Hello, thank you.
You want to give us your report?
I would just like to add and really just thank our park staff for the time that I was off. They did a fantastic job and really just allowed me to focus on healing, and they handled themselves very professionally and just did a really good job. So thank them. I want to thank the board too. The only thing I would add is the shed at the senior center. Construction on that started today, so I imagine just a few days that'll be
back there in that corner.
Back in the corner where we had decided. Yep. And that's all I would have to add.
Any questions of our park superintendent?
Not this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Seiler, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you have anything to add to your report?
Just like to mention that, as you'll notice there, are our upcoming events that we have listed on the agenda. We have a significant number of events coming up, starting with this coming Saturday and Sunday with the cheer competition, and really even beyond this schedule that we have here, we will have a few other things in the month of May as well. So we've got a lot of things happening over the next several months.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Seiler?
Nope.
Seemed to me I had something. What was it? I guess I don't. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Seiler. Mr. Boer, how about you?
I would just go over a couple specifics on the clubhouse renovation and kind of where they are right now. So they are papering the roof, which is the last step before putting on shingles. There were windows that arrived today that they started to install, and then electricians are running wiring currently. The HVAC ductwork is being installed, and you have plumbers doing quite a bit of piping inside. So that's where we are right now.
What's the approximate date of completion, knowing that it's approximate?
Yes, the updated schedule that they gave us was May 1st or 2nd.
Okay. All right, good. Any questions of Mr. Boer? Okay, thank you. We'll get back to you on another matter here later in the agenda. I've got no planning commission report to give to you. Okay, well, let's get back to you on that matter on the agenda, and that is the naming of the concession stand out at the golf course. We have had a survey, and the public has weighed in on some names that they thought they might like. We have a legislation in the city about naming of public venues, and that is vested in the city council to do that. I don't know if you're familiar. Did you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. That was adopted in 2011, apparently. So we make a recommendation to city council concerning the name, and what I'd like to hear from you guys is your top 3 choices, and let's talk about them. Susan, why don't you get started? What do you think your top 3 choices are?
Well, I don't really have top 3. I kind of looked at the names that were given, and I felt the same as Kyler as far as the Shoreline and the Ross Room, but I'm not a golfer, so I don't have any hard feelings about any other particular names. I was a bit of a fan of Golfy McGolferson, but I don't think anybody's going to go for that one.
We got to keep in mind too, when we rebrand this, we're not only rebranding it for the golfers, but also the potential for wedding venues and things like that. So I was kind of liking Liars Club, but as Sue pointed out, that's not a real good wedding venue name. Right?
Probably not.
So my top 3 was Mulligan's, Birdie's, and Cafe at the Shores. But anything to deal with the shores branding, the shoreline, things like that, might be a good. Jordan, what are yours?
Yeah, I also like the shoreline. I know there was 57 different entries, so that was positive that it was receive that much traction. But I think my favorite was probably the Donald Ross Room, just the kind of patronage to the course design and history, and I think we do a good job with recognizing that in the city of Troy. So just one of those things that kind of continues that on, and especially if you think about the wedding venue aspect, that's a, you know, it's a name that passes that test as well.
Okay, well, let's talk about those then that we talked about. Let's talk about the Ross Room, okay? Ross was an architect back in the 1950s, 40s?
Yeah, I mean.
How
his
much
work-
traction is that name going to have for the next 100 years?
Oh, I would say quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
he's well known as far as.
The golfing
as
community.
far, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
once again, if we're trying to go ahead and brand this venue for something other than golfers, is that going to be a?
And to be clear, I mean, when I had, at least my personal suggestion was to only name the, you know, meeting space within the concession area, the Ross Room, given that it has the ability to be divided off into a smaller meeting room space. So that was, you know, my idea as far as that goes. So I think I had provided Shoreline and Under Par as my top two suggestions for the naming of the overall concession space, with a separate name for that meeting space, which holds about 30 people. So, yeah, I do agree. I wouldn't necessarily, the widespread appeal of the Donald Ross Room or the Ross Room for the overall concession space, I don't think that has, you know, a widespread appeal. You know.
And that's what we're talking about today, right? It's a naming for that, not necessarily just the other room.
Correct.
So-
Yeah, that was just as an idea of, you know, having a name for the concession with a you know, a standalone name for that room that could be divided, because it can be used on its own as a meeting space, you know, for businesses and things like that. So it can be, you know, partitioned off, and you know, in other words, activities could be going on inside of that room while the rest of the facility is still under normal operation.
Sure.
Mr. Seiler, a lot of these are going to be maybe carryovers from Hobart Arena and the rooms you have over there that might be then coming over to the shores. Do you
Yeah,
have any
that's a
thoughts?
possible thought.
Do you have any
is
thoughts
that-
about the Shoreline, Mulligan's, Birdie's, Cafe at the Shores as to possible names, or the Ross Room?
I don't necessarily have any particular one in mind, but I think you mentioned that we need to think about the fact that it's a space that is beyond just a space for golfers, and then it's going to be marketed above and beyond just to that target demographic. And so, you know, we're looking at it as though we're going to have, or we're going to get to the point where we're going to try to utilize this space to fill a void that we potentially already have. If we have a group already booked at the arena, that we can offer them this opportunity here. But then also from a marketing perspective, that we can market this space to groups, whatever kind of groups, it'd be corporate, wedding receptions, and not to conflict with what he's doing at the golf course, but during the off season, in the months of, you know, October, November, December, that it can be marketed in a way in which it can be utilized for those other purposes above and beyond golf. So I think that's just something to keep in mind when we're trying to determine what this space may be named, as opposed to just something that's specific to golf.
Okay.
And it could be challenging too. Tyler was mentioning about naming a portion of the room something, but not the entire space. That could become challenging and confusing for people potentially.
True.
But what could you call that space if it can still be, I mean, it's got to be named something so that
Oh,
people
no, I
can
mean, I think
differentiate.
the Ross Room would be an appropriate name for the space.
But I
To
mean,
the
maybe-
contrary, though, it doesn't have to be named.
Right,
It
but I
can all
mean,
be
you would
called,
have to call it something
doesn't
like
have to.
Well, it's part of the larger space, but it can be partitioned.
right,
That's correct.
Yeah.
right,
So, yes, it does not have to be named, I would say.
yeah.
Okay. I like the names with something with the shores in it, just to kind of identify where it's at. Shoreline things gives me the concept of a beach.
But I kind of like that
Do you like
because
that?
it's called Miami Shores, so,
Right.
you know,
The shore.
to me, that would lend itself to other venues, you know, but that's just my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, if we didn't call it Miami Shores, maybe Shoreline would make you think of that, but it is called Miami Shores.
Jeremy, do you have any input on this?
I think my biggest thing just sitting here listening to this is a couple things come to mind. I think first and foremost, when you talk about branding, the broader you can stay, rather than focusing in just on the room per se, or the rentable space within the restaurant area. So once you choose whatever it is, and it seems to be Miami Shores or Shoreline seems to be one of those things you could key in on, but focus on that first for the overall space, and then whatever the room, if we do name the meeting space separate, you could have the Ross Room at Shoreline Cafe or Ross Room at the Shoreline, to designate that separate space, a smaller space. But once you choose whatever it is, Shoreline, Shores, that becomes the branding piece that you can focus on and really key on, so that people correlate, you know, like Mrs. Westfall just said, correlate that to Miami Shores or to the clubhouse and the restaurant there.
If we were to focus on the Shoreline as a name, if that was what we'd choose, do we need anything else before or after it, like the Shoreline Restaurant or the Shoreline Cafe or anything like that?
I think it
The
would
sand trap at the Shoreline?
I personally think just calling it the Shoreline kind of encompasses everything, and then you don't have to, you can say, okay, if it's going to be a wedding venue, you're going to be at the Shoreline, you know, and then it doesn't have to be separated, but that's just my thoughts.
What do
I
you
don't
think?
know.
It gives you some room to pivot down the line if you want to do something else, right?
We can always change it.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So I mean, I kind of like the broad idea of just going with the Shoreline. That's
Okay.
I think it works out.
Well, one of you want to make a motion to that effect, that we recommend to council the name?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we recommend to the council the name of the Shoreline.
I second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abby, will you pass it on to committee of council, the adoption of the name, please? Thank you. Next, Mr. Brewer, you want to talk about the T-sign proposal bid?
Sure, so we did just get one bid from a company by the name of Golf Graphics. Tim Boutwell is their president. He's the one that I've been dealing with directly on this for a while. So I think there were a few details that maybe Sue could speak to that, a few details that needed to get worked out as far as...
Mrs. Knight, you want to come forward and talk about this bid on the signs, please?
Only that the Director of Law will be providing a few changes or additions to the contract, the sample contract that the vendor provided. And, you know, he would ask that his requirements be incorporated into any of those agreements to provide the best protection for the city. Other than that, he did not have any comments in regard to the one proposal we received.
Okay, thank you. Kyler, were you satisfied with the proposal?
Yes, yeah, I worked with Tim pretty extensively on this, and so there's, I would recommend that we authorize the agreement.
Okay, I will make the motion authorizing the execution of the agreement upon the advice and counsel of the law director as to the terms and conditions of the agreement.
I second that.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, presentation from the Troy Strawberry Festival. Somebody out there want to make a presentation? You'd come forward, ma'am, and give us your name and address, social security number, and things like that.
Oh, gosh. My name is Kaylee Poore. I am the event manager for the Troy Chamber of Commerce and the Troy Strawberry Festival. We are just requesting the use of Duke Park on June 2nd, starting at 8:30 for our 10K route due to the construction on Riverside Drive that will be happening during that weekend. We had to find an alternative route, and I met with Tom Funderburg and Sergeant Chris Bob of the Sheriff's Department, along with our 10K chairman, Jeff Kudron, and we kind of unanimously came to the conclusion that this would be the safest route for the runners, and not as big of an impact as it would anywhere else.
So you're asking for use of Duke Park on June 2nd and a couple of shelters?
Yeah,
Also?
two shelters, one for registration and then one post-race.
Ken, do we have any conflicts with the use of those shelters on June 2nd in Duke Park?
We'll just have to confirm that. I don't believe so. I believe we'll
We'll have to confirm which ones are available for you and
Okay.
to accommodate it best.
Yep.
Shouldn't be an issue to get a couple of them.
Okay.
Jeremy, how about you? Any problems with?
Yeah, I don't see any issues.
Okay. Anything else to add, ma'am?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Does the commission want to take any action on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the use of Duke Park for the Strawberry 10K Classic.
And I'll second that.
Subject to confirmation by Mr.
Yes.
Seiler that it's available?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Seiler will be in contact with you. If you make sure that he has your number before you leave.
Oh, he knows.
No, he's married, so. Okay. Next, we've got a consideration recommending the planning commission accepting the fees in lieu of parkland for the proposed subdivisions of the villages of Concord. Who's making that presentation?
I will, thank you.
Okay.
So the city has received an application. This would be a build-out to the existing Villages of Concord. If you're not familiar with it, it's located off of on Wayne Street. It's just west of the former Stouter Hospital and north of the Kroger Marketplace. Right now, it's a development of existing of condos that has yet to be finished. What they're proposing to do is to create 35 buildable lots over the 10 acres. And the subdivision regulations require 3% of open space. They have not provided that, so they are asking for fees in lieu of. Right now, the 3% of the open space would just be 3/10 of an acre. And because of the small development and the only 35 homes, staff would recommend, hopefully, that the park board would see fit to accept fees in lieu of, which would, if it is built out, create $17,500 for the Parks and Rec Capital Fund.
Well, this has nothing to do with the acceptance of the plat. Or
That's
the
correct.
approval of the plat. As an aside, could you tell us how they're suggesting that do away with the condos out there?
Yeah, so they would actually keep the condos in place the way they are. They would just simply lot off the lots that are not for condos. They would have to meet the zoning code requirement, which is a minimum of 6,000 square feet. So they've done that with the 35 lots.
How are they going to get public access back to those lots?
So we had them create an instrument that provides, it used to be owned by Roger L. Hawk and then Troy Investment Group. So they've deeded that together. The law director has that deed. He actually gave approval of that last week to allow public access throughout both the existing developed area and the proposed developed area.
Using the current streets that are in place?
Using the current streets in place. They would have to do final course of asphalt and things of that nature, but yes.
Interesting, okay. Any questions of staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion one way or the other.
Motion to accept the fees in lieu for the Concord Villages of Concord.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is adopted unanimously. Okay, I have another matter here for Treasure Island use agreements. Is anybody making a presentation on that?
With your permission, I could.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Mrs.
I also
Knight.
believe there might have been an item skipped on your agenda.
Oh,
I mean, not that you would do that intentionally.
I didn't see that.
The change, we had provided a list that was approved, I believe, at the January Park Board meeting that had to do with a number of events associated with Parkland, and we had a change of a date. The changing of the June 22nd concert to June 29 is recommended by the Recreation Department, as would be a better fit of a date. There's a concert in Piqua they don't want to conflict with. And then, as we had said, there would be things to be added, which included 2 dates for showing movies at Treasure Island Park. And we have a June 18th request with a rain date of June 25 and a July 9 with a rain date of July 16. And these are worked out between the library and the Recreation Department. So we just ask that those be added to the list that we had provided.
I'd move to approve the consideration of those matters, approve those date changes, et cetera. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now do you want to talk about the Treasure Island use agreements, or did we just do that?
No, the use agreements are particular recommendations to council because these concerts were on your agenda, but they will include the sale of adult beverages, and so we ask that you make a recommendation to council to consider use agreements for those two events. And those are the only two we know of at this point that would require this additional action for the use agreements. And Mr. Seiler and I have been talking about this as he's worked it through with the Recreation Board's already approved it. And now it comes to the Park Board to recommend to council, and it becomes a three-party agreement between the Park Board, the Rec Board, and the city, authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into the use agreements if the council concurs.
You indicated the sale of adult beverages. You mean beer, right? Or are there also mixed drinks?
It's only beer.
Only
Beer.
Yeah,
Beer and other malt beverages that classify as beer.
gotcha. All right. You know, I've been to those concerts in the past, and I think they've been well received, and the participants hold themselves out in an orderly fashion, so I don't have any problem with this.
And they're managed, of course, by Mr. Seiler and Carrie Slater and their staff, who are very well-trained and
And do an excellent job.
excellent job.
Any questions?
I don't have any problem.
No.
Okay. Anybody want to entertain a motion to that effect?
A motion to accept the dates with the addition of the alcohol sales for the Treasure Island events.
What we're asking to do is to recommend
Recommend to
council.
council.
Recommend to
approve of those.
council.
Yes, please.
Approve,
All right.
yes.
Is
Gotcha.
there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can have that back. Mr. Terrington, did you have anything you want to bring before the commission? Anybody else who wanted to speak? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
Okay, I'll move. That's okay. Jordan seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we stand